Hey, Chapel students, I'm so glad that you're joining us here at CS Live, and we're in a new series called Are We There Yet? Navigating the Chaos of Quarantine. And so we're going to take the next few weeks to talk a little bit about the deserts, the storms, and the valleys that we walk through, and then hopefully the promise of God that when we get on the other side of this. And so excited that you would join us today. We're going to dive right in. Have you ever done something that you just immediately regret? Right, you remember Anchorman. I immediately regretted this decision. And here's the reality is that all of us do those kind of things. I've done quite a few of those. The family motto that we lived by was go big or, well, you know the rest, go home. And there was this reality that my brother, who was always so much better at things and way better at extreme sports, was always doing things so much better than me. And there was a 10-year gap. And so we always challenged each other, go big or go home. Like, don't be a wussy. So go big or go home. These are some of the things that I immediately regretted. I remember pulling our boat up on the river and looking up at a tree 35 feet, and everyone said, you should jump. And I thought, I should. And I jumped and I landed straight on my back on the water. It knocked the wind out of me. I remember snowboarding, and there was this gap. It was a 50-foot gap. I did about 48 feet of it, landed in the backside of it, snapped my snowboard, and got 2 big black eyes. When I was a kid, we had bicycles, and we would drive down, and we would jump a big ramp into the lake, and we thought, that's not fast enough. So I would grab onto this guy's little Ford Ranger. He would go as fast as he can down the road, and when I tried to pedal, my feet slipped off, and it drug across the concrete before I hit the ramp, and it ripped all of my toenails off. Go big or go home. It's just not a great motto. It's not a thing to live by. It's a cool thing to say, but here's the problem with it. Every time I went big, I then still had to go home. I had to go home and tell my parents the stupid thing that I did. Home wasn't always just the spot where I had to go home and tell the stupid thing I've done. Home also was a great place. My dad and I had so much fun learning to fix different things. In fact, he would ship cars in and out and always working on a car to make a little bit of money. At one point, I got a little jealous because people would be handing him big fat stacks of cash, and I'm like, how do I get in on that? I was 14, and I was talking to the janitor at my middle school, and he said his car broke, and I was like, I can fix it. And it turns out it was a head gasket, which turns out it's a really in-depth job. I didn't know that. My dad fixed things, but I didn't fix things yet. I told him I'd do it for $300. He was ecstatic. I brought the car in. I spent a week with my dad as he told me how to do everything. Got the car finished. I was so excited. I called the guy up and said, it's running perfect. I can't wait to get it back to you. Could you come pick it up tomorrow? And he told me he couldn't pick it up tomorrow because he didn't have a car. And so he said he would pay me extra money, which perked my ears, if I drove the car to him tonight. So I told my dad the story, and he said, no, leave the car in the garage. You're 14, you can't drive the car. Don't do it. I didn't listen. I got the keys to the car, and just go big or go home, right? Started it up, rolled the windows down, turned the radio up, and I went down the highway going about 55 miles an hour, and it was wonderful. It was beautiful. It was like, wow, this is incredible. Until the wind caught right underneath the hood and where I didn't shut the hood all the way. And just like that, it went from incredible to terrible in a second. Wham! The wind had blew the hood up and over. It smashed the whole windshield in while I was driving. It bent the hood over the top of the car. I was devastated. I didn't know what to do. I pulled the car over. I knew I was in trouble. I grabbed the keys. I left it there, and the same road that I had so much fun driving down, I walked back, and I rehearsed in my head what I was going to tell my dad. I didn't know how to tell this janitor that I just ruined his car. I didn't know what to do, but I went home. You know, my story is similar to a story we find in the Bible. It's in Luke 15, and I'm actually not going to read the whole story. I'm just going to tell you it, but I encourage you to take time to read Luke 15 right at the end of it. Read the whole thing. You've got plenty of time. You're in quarantine. This is a story of the prodigal son, and so I was much like that prodigal son, doing what I want, when I want, how I want. And I assume if you're anything like me, and I know I am, you probably do the same thing. Whatever you want, when you want, how you want to do it. And it doesn't always end up well. The story goes that Jesus is telling these tax collectors and Pharisees and, really smart religious people, the story of all of these lost items. And he gets to the prodigal son where he says, a father, who in this story is representative of God, has these two sons. And the one son looks at the dad and says, I want my money. I want what you owe me. And essentially, in Jewish tradition, a kid would get the money from the father when he died. So essentially, this son was looking at his dad and said, I wish you were dead. In fact, I wish you were dead so much that I could have my money. I want it now. And the dad, in the story, didn't blink an eye. He went and got it, gave it to him, and said, you can do with it what you want. You have free will to choose how you want to love and live in this world. Go with it. And the kid went down a road. He went down a road of wild living. Some actual versions say with prostitutes and alcohol, and it was a bad scene that he found himself in. But eventually the money ran out, and when the money ran out, the friends ran out. And when the friends ran out, everything just looked terrible. He went from Yahoo wild living to bam! What do I do now? In that, the whole world had experienced a famine at that same time. So there wasn't food around. So he didn't have anything. He didn't have any money, any friends, and he didn't have any food. So he hired himself out to a servant of that country, and he started doing some work. And he would feed pigs, and the story would go that Jesus was telling these guys that this young Jewish boy had to feed pigs. It's funny there. There's irony there because Jewish people didn't associate with pigs at all. They were gross. They were hooved animals. They were dirty. They were unclean. And so not only did he have to get a job from a citizen of that country, he had to get the worst job you possibly could get. So things went from wild living to not good to worse. Eventually, he kind of comes to his senses and he thinks to himself, the people at my dad's farm eat better and live better than I currently do. And he's looking at the pig slop that the pigs eat and thinking, I'd eat the pig slop at this point, which is terrible. And so he does what I did. The same road he took down, he turned 180 degrees and went back to Dad to tell him of the stupid thing he did. He rehearsed this story over and over again. And as he's walking down this road, probably a dark valley in his life where he's just saying, what have I done? What's wrong with me? What choices have I made? How did I even get here? Now, as he's walking, the story says that Jesus gives this picture of the father who sees his son a long way off. And it's as if he has been waiting for him. He's looking for him, and he sees him a long way off. And he pulls up his robe, and he starts running down the road. And now there's a lot of things happening in the Jewish tradition here that are a little crazy, right? One, you don't pull up your robe, you're a dude, all right? So this guy had to pull up his robe to run. One, you don't run, you're a dude, all right? This is ancient Jewish times, so it's a little different than today. And three, you absolutely don't accept the son back into your home who said, I wish you were dead. But this dad did all those things. This father was a good father who chased after his kids. And with the deepest father's heart compassion said, I love you. Get a ring, get some sandals, get a robe. Let's kill a fatted calf and have a party because my son who was lost is now found. My son who was dead is now alive. And Jesus gives a picture of God to all of these people sitting around the table that day that they had never heard of. And God loves people. He doesn't forget them. He doesn't push them off to the side. Even in their wandering, he loves them, and he waits, and he looks, and he hopes that one day we'll come back. I don't know about you and how you're navigating quarantine, but we find ourselves in this prodigal son story often. I do. Where things are going great, and then you're like, God, I want to do things my way. And we rip it back, and we take everything that we think we should do, and we get on a road, and we go down to wild living. Well, wild living often leads to a storm, where we're building blocks of our lives on something that is shaky, and one day will be ripped away from us. And then after we've done our wild living and living in that storm, we find ourselves in a desert, where everything seems dry and terrible, and you can't do anything else. You can't move forward because you're stuck in this desert situation. You come to your senses in the desert where things have just been terrible, and you move through the valley. And in the valley, You're going, there's no joy left. There's no life to have. But I'm going back and saying, would you forgive me? And it's a tough spot in the valley. And then we get home, and instead of a dad who goes, what's wrong with you? How dare you? We see a dad who pulls up his robe, runs right to us. He's been looking for us. And he embraces us and throws a party, which is contrary to anything that a father should do when we've lived the way that we've lived. And I don't know about you, but I'd love for you to take some time to identify yourself in the story. In quarantine, are you in wild living? Doing whatever you want, whenever you want, however you want? That foundation will be ripped from you one day. In quarantine, do you find yourself sad and sorrowful for the way you've been living? You might be in a desert right now. That's a hard spot to be. It feels dry and lonely, no life. Maybe you've realized that you've done both of those and you're on your way back, and you find yourself to be in a valley where you're just contemplating the decisions that you've made and you're regretful for what you've done, but you're going back to the Father. Or maybe some of you are in the promised land where you feel so connected to the Father, where there's parties all day with Him, right? Things aren't always perfect, but you know that God loves you. You know that He desires to have this integrated relationship with you, and you're living out of that. I don't know where you are, but I'd love for you to take time to think, to pause, and to break, to think about where you are. See, prodigal isn't a person. Prodigal is a position, right? Prodigal helps us understand where we are in the story. And when you figure out where you are in the story, then you can figure out how to get to where you need to go. But first you have to figure out where you are. You know, that's the first question we hear in the Bible. When you read the Genesis story, the first question that we hear is God asking humans, Adam and Eve, where are you? And the funny thing about it is God knows where they are. The question isn't so that Adam and Eve can identify the position that they are to God. It's actually so they can identify the position they are to themselves. Sometimes we need to ask the question, where am I? Not to answer it for anybody else, but to answer it for myself. See, what you've done plus how you feel doesn't equal who you are. It equals where you are. So the things that you've done and the feelings that you have don't describe who you are. They describe where you are. And if that's true, when you figure out where you are, you can figure out how to get back. I was on a road with a busted up car, and I knew back home was 180 degrees in the other direction. Did I know what was going to happen when I got there? No. No, but I trust my dad. If I can trust my dad, then I can trust our dad. And if we can trust our dad that He is good and He is love and He chases after us, that's an important thing. So my question is this: where are you? Most of us think of prodigal as expensive taste, lavishly spending money, recklessly. The second definition is giving lavishly, over and abundant. You know, prodigal doesn't necessarily mean that we are in a position of terrible decisions. It actually also describes God, that His love is prodigal for us, over and abundant, lavish for you and me. Where are you?